My name is Sara Malik, and I'm 39 years old, and I run a financial abuse recovery nonprofit in Atlanta, Georgia, that has helped over 300 women in the state navigate what I am about to describe to you. I want to start there because I want you to understand where this story ends before I take you to where it begins. Because where it begins is a Tuesday morning in March, 5 years ago, when my credit union called me at 7:42 while I was making coffee and told me that an account in my name was 90 days past due. And I said, I think there has been a mistake. And the woman on the other end of the phone said, Miss Malik, can you verify your social security number? And I did, and she said, that is correct. And I said it again, I think there has been a mistake. And she said, the account was opened 4 years ago. And I said nothing for 4 seconds, because 4 seconds was how long it took me to understand that there was no mistake. My husband had been gone for 3 days. I want to be careful about how I describe what happened, because I have spent 5 years learning the language for it, and the language matters. What my husband did was not a misunderstanding. It was not impulsive. What he did was open 11 financial accounts using my personal identifying information across 4 years of our marriage, make payments on those accounts sporadically enough to keep them from appearing in my awareness, but not consistently enough to prevent the eventual delinquency that produced the Tuesday morning phone call, and then leave before the delinquency surfaced. He had not left dramatically. He had left on a Saturday. His clothes were gone, his car was gone. There was a text from a number I did not recognize that said, I am sorry. That was everything I was going to receive from him by way of explanation. Before I tell you what the 6 days after the Tuesday call looked like, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you are when you listen to this. Now, let me tell you what I found. I took the week off work. I called my manager on Tuesday afternoon and said I had a family emergency, and she said, take what you need. And I took 5 days, because 5 days was what it took to get through the documentation. I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus on Tuesday afternoon. I sat at my kitchen table in Atlanta with my laptop and a legal pad, and I went through every account. The credit union account that had called me, 10 others, a personal loan for $32,000 opened 3.5 years ago, a second personal loan for $28,000, a line of credit for $15,000, 4 credit cards with combined balances of $61,000, a business financing application for $38,000 that had been opened in my name for what the documents described as a consulting business I had never heard of, and 2 more accounts I will not detail here because the specifics are less important than the shape of what they add up to. $241,000. I wrote the number on the legal pad. I looked at it for a while. I had spent 8 years building a marriage, and my husband had spent 4 of those years building something else. And the something else was $241,000 of debt in my name, and the specific destruction of a credit profile that I had spent 15 years building carefully, and that now reflected on paper the financial history of a person who had made 11 consecutive irresponsible decisions. I had made none of them. I want to say that clearly, because when you are sitting at a kitchen table in Atlanta looking at a legal pad with a number that large on it, the clarity of that sentence is the only thing that holds. I had made none of them. My name was on all of them. Both of those things were simultaneously true, and the distance between them was the entire problem. I called my sister in Houston on Wednesday evening. I told her everything. She said, Sarah, you need an attorney. I said, I know. She said, you need to file a police report. I said, I know. She said, are you okay? I said, I am not okay right now. I said, I am going to be okay. She said, I know you are. She said it with the specific confidence of a woman who has known me my entire life and who understood, even in that phone call, that okay was something I was capable of getting to. She was right. I just needed to get there. The attorney was a woman named Patricia Walsh who specialized in financial fraud and identity theft cases in Georgia, and who had the direct, efficient manner of someone who has seen many versions of this situation and has stopped being surprised by any of them, while remaining genuinely angry on behalf of the people experiencing them. I met her on Thursday. I brought everything I had: the credit reports, the account documents I had been able to access online, the text from the unknown number, a timeline I had constructed of what I knew and when. She reviewed everything for 45 minutes while I sat across from her. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Sara, what your husband did is a crime." She said, "It is called financial identity theft, and it is prosecutable, and I want to walk you through your options before we discuss anything else." She walked me through the options: filing a police report, which created an official record and was the first step toward disputing the accounts with the credit bureaus as fraudulent; contacting each creditor directly with the police report and documentation of the fraud; working with the credit bureaus to flag the accounts and begin the dispute process; and pursuing a civil case against my husband if he could be located, which Patricia noted was often difficult in situations like this, but was worth initiating. I filed the police report on Thursday afternoon. I began the creditor contacts on Friday. Patricia drafted dispute letters that I sent certified mail to all 3 bureaus the following Monday. The process, Patricia told me, was going to take time, not weeks, potentially years. Some accounts would be removed quickly, others would require multiple rounds of dispute and documentation, and the specific, patient persistence of a person who is willing to fight the same ground repeatedly, because giving up means the debt stands, and the debt standing means it is hers, and it was never hers. I said, "I understand." I said, "I am not going to stop." She looked at me for a moment. She said, "I can see that." She said, "I want you to know that I am going to be in this with you for as long as it takes." I paid her with savings I had set aside for a vacation. The vacation fund became the attorney fund. That was the first of many redirections. There would be many more. I was learning to redirect. The second job started in month 4. I want to talk about the second job because I think it is the part of this story that people gloss over, and I do not want to gloss over it because it was 3 years of my life, and it was the foundation of everything that came after it. My marketing director's salary covered my rent and my regular expenses and Patricia's fees, and not the debt repayment, not on its own. The accounts that were not successfully disputed, the ones where the fraud was harder to prove because my husband had been careful about the documentation, were going to have to be paid down because leaving them in collections was going to cost me more in the long run than settling them. Patricia was honest about this. Some of what he did was prosecutable as fraud. Some of it was going to be mine to manage financially regardless. I took a second position as a freelance marketing consultant, evening and weekend work. I built a client list over 3 months, and I had 4 clients by month 6, and I was working 60 to 70 hours a week, and I was tired in the specific deep way of someone who is running at a pace that cannot be sustained indefinitely, but that can be sustained for a defined period toward a defined goal. The goal was the number, 241,000 minus the accounts that were successfully disputed and removed. The remaining balance after disputes was approximately $114,000. That was my number, $114,000 across however many months it took. It took 4 years and 7 months, not because I was slow, because I was doing it alongside a full-time job, and the disputes and the legal process and the specific daily administration of being a person who has been defrauded and actively fighting back on multiple fronts simultaneously. 4 years and 7 months of the second job, and the redirections and the months where the progress felt invisible, and the months where I could see it clearly in the numbers, and the morning I made the final payment and sat at my kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had looked at the legal pad 5 years earlier, and looked at a zero balance. I did not celebrate immediately. I sat with it for a while, the way you sit with something that required 4 years and 7 months and more of yourself than you knew you had. Then I called my sister. She screamed. I cried. That was the celebration. The nonprofit was not a plan. I want to be honest about that because the version of this story where I immediately turned my experience into a mission is not the true version. The true version is that it grew from something smaller and more personal and arrived at what it became through a series of decisions that each felt necessary in the moment, rather than strategic in retrospect. It started 6 months after the final payment. I had begun talking about my experience more openly, not publicly at first, but to friends and colleagues and the specific network of women who found their way to me through Patricia's referrals and through the quiet word of mouth of people who had been through something similar and were looking for someone who understood it completely. I started meeting with those women informally, one at a time, in coffee shops in Atlanta on Saturday mornings, helping them understand the dispute process, the legal options, what to expect from creditors and attorneys, and the timeline of a situation that felt impossible from the inside and was survivable with the right information and the right support. By the end of the first year, I had met with 31 women. By the end of the second year, 64. By the third year, I had a volunteer attorney and an accountant, and a social worker, and a name, and a registered nonprofit status in the state of Georgia, and an office space donated by a law firm that had heard what I was doing and wanted to support it. The organization is called New Ground Financial. The name came from something Patricia said to me in our first meeting, that the goal was to help me build new ground after what had been taken. I thought about that for 3 years before I used it. We have now worked with over 300 women across Georgia. We help them understand their legal rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Identity Theft Enforcement and Restitution Act. We connect them with pro bono legal support. We provide one-on-one financial coaching through the dispute and recovery process, and we advocate at the state level for stronger protections for victims of intimate partner financial abuse. Because the legal framework, when I went through it, was not built with my situation in mind, and it needs to be better, and I have the specific credibility of someone who has been through it to say so. My ex-husband was located 2 years after he left. A civil judgment was issued. It has not been collected. I do not expect it to be. I made peace with that in the 3rd year, when I understood that the collection was not the point, and never had been. The point was the ground I had built. New ground, mine. Solid in a way that no one person's departure could remove, because I had built it myself, with my own hands across 4 years and 7 months, and the specific determination of a woman who had been handed the worst thing and had decided, in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March, that the worst thing was going to become the most useful thing. It did. It has. It continues to. If you are in the middle of what I was in the beginning of, the credit reports and the legal pad and the number that looks impossible, I want you to hear this clearly. The number is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of what you build next. Get an attorney, file the police report, pull your credit reports, document everything, and then put one foot in front of the other for as long as it takes, because it takes as long as it takes, and you are capable of the whole distance. I know you are, because I was, and the only thing that was special about me was that I refused to stop. You can refuse to stop too. That is my story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.